¿Quieres hablar inglés como un nativo? Prueba el método shadowing. Repite conmigo en voz alta y sin miedo. Escucha, imita y habla. Así es como se entrena el oído y la boca. Aquí no solo aprendes, aquí hablas inglés desde el primer minuto. Suscríbete y empieza ahora mismo a hablar como siempre soñaste. In the heart of a bustling city filled with noise and traffic, there was a man who stood each day under the scorching sun. He carried a large plastic cooler strapped to an old cart, and inside it were bottles of cold water. He sold them for just a few coins, hoping each bottle would bring him closer to his dream. He wasn't dreaming for himself, but for someone he loved more than life itself, his daughter. Every morning, before the sun rose, he packed the cart and whispered a silent prayer. The city didn't notice him. To most, he was just another street vendor blending into the background. But his mission was noble. He wasn't just selling water. He was building a future. For every coin he earned, he saved a portion, folding it carefully into a worn envelope hidden in his shirt pocket. He didn't spend on luxuries. He barely ate. His shoes were torn and his hands were calloused. But his heart was rich with purpose. The money wasn't for him. It was for school fees, books, and uniforms. His daughter meant everything. And her education was the hope he clung to. He had no office, no title, and no prestige, but he had a reason to keep going every day. People passed him by, rarely stopping to buy. Some even mocked him, laughing at his old clothes or ignoring his polite greetings, but he remained kind. He never responded with anger. Instead, he smiled, sometimes with tears hidden in the corners of his eyes. He believed kindness was strength. In the evenings, he would walk for miles back to their small apartment. It was a single room with a leaking roof and creaky floorboards, but to him it was a palace because she lived there. His daughter would greet him with a hug and a kiss on the cheek, always asking how his day went. She knew the truth. She saw the sacrifices. And though she was just a child, she vowed silently to make his efforts worth it. While other kids played, she studied. She read by candlelight and dreamed of a white coat and a stethoscope. She didn't just want to succeed, she wanted to heal, to give back, to honor the man who gave her everything. Years passed like pages in a book. The city changed. New buildings rose, traffic grew worse, and faces became more distant. But the man kept selling water, even as his back began to ache and his hair turned gray. The cart grew heavier with each passing year, but he pushed it with the same determination. His daughter, now a young woman, began medical school. The cost was overwhelming. He sold even more, working longer hours. Some nights he fainted from exhaustion. But when he woke up, he'd say, "I'm okay. I have a goal." His neighbors started to notice. They began to admire his perseverance. Even those who once ignored him now bought water and called him Sir. His name began to mean something, not fame or glory, but respect. One evening, as he counted the day's coins under a flickering light bulb, his daughter knelt beside him and said, "One day, I'll take care of you." He just smiled and replied, "You already do." Her studies were difficult. She faced challenges, pressure, and doubt. But she carried her father's strength like a shield, Every exam was a mountain, but she climbed with determination. Every time she felt like giving up. She remembered his worn shoes, his sunburned skin, his gentle voice saying, "You can do it." She was fueled not by ambition, but by love. She knew the difference between success and significance. She didn't want to be rich. She wanted to matter. And so when she finally graduated, wearing that white coat and holding her degree, she didn't see her reflection. She saw her father's reflection in her eyes. She ran home that day, tears in her eyes, and placed the certificate in his hands. "This is yours," she said. He couldn't speak. His lips trembled. He had never gone to school, but he had given the greatest education of sacrifice, of resilience, of unconditional love. In that moment, they were both victorious. The years had not been easy, but they had been meaningful. The man retired his cart. No more long walks, no more scorching heat. Instead, he sat by the window with a warm cup of tea, watching the neighborhood children play. His daughter had opened a small clinic, not in the wealthy part of town, but in the poorest corner, where the forgotten lived. She treated those who had nothing, just like they once had. She charged nothing to those who couldn't pay. Her reputation grew, not as a rich doctor, but as a compassionate one. People traveled from far away just to be treated by her. And when asked why she did it, she always replied, "Because love paid for my education." Her clinic had one framed photo on the wall. An old man with a cart, holding bottles of water and a smile that reached his eyes. Beneath it were the words, "The man who built a doctor with coins of love." The clinic was humble, bare walls, second-hand equipment, and old wooden benches, but it was filled with something far more powerful than luxury. It was filled with hope. Each patient who walked through the door felt seen, not as a number or a diagnosis, but as a human being. The doctor greeted each person with warmth and patience, no matter how crowded the waiting room became. Word spread quickly about the young woman who treated the poor for free. Some brought vegetables, others brought prayers, and a few brought nothing but gratitude. She accepted all with grace. The doctor often remembered her father as she worked, his worn-out shoes, his tired eyes, and the strength in his silence. She had learned medicine in university, but she had learned humanity at home. Every injection she gave, every wound she cleaned, was done in honor of him. To her, every healed child was a thank you to the man who gave her everything. And when she returned home each night, she made him tea, just like he used to make for her when she was little. One day, a young boy with a fever was brought in by his older sister. They had walked for miles barefoot because they had no money. When the girl apologized for not being able to pay, the doctor knelt down, smiled, and said, "Don't worry, I was once like you." She treated the boy with great care, explaining every step gently so they wouldn't feel afraid. After the boy was stable, she gave them some bread and water. The sister cried, not out of sadness, but from being seen. The doctor hugged her and whispered, "You're not alone." As they left, the boy turned back and waved. Moments like these gave her strength. They reminded her that pain could be transformed into purpose, that her father's struggle was not in vain. He had planted a seed, and it was blooming into a tree of compassion. She often looked at the photo in the clinic, especially on hard days, and whispered, "We're still giving water, Papa, just in a different way." The doctor never married, not because she didn't believe in love, but because her love was already devoted to something bigger. Her father was aging now, slower in his steps and softer in his voice. She spent every evening by his side, telling him about the people she had helped that day. He would listen with quiet pride, nodding, sometimes holding back tears. They had come full circle. The daughter who once depended on him now cared for him completely. He no longer worried about bills or long walks, only about whether she was resting enough. "Don't work too hard," he'd say. She would kiss his forehead and say, "You did the hard part. I'm just finishing your race." On weekends, they sat in the park together, watching the world go by. Children played, lovers strolled, and birds sang from the trees. The man who once sold water in the heat now sipped tea in the shade. And every now and then, someone would recognize him from the photo. "Are you the doctor's father?" they'd ask. He'd smile and say, "I'm the water seller." He became a quiet legend in the neighborhood, not because he had wealth or power, but because he had given all he had for someone else's future. Younger fathers came to him for advice. Young men looked at him with admiration. Mothers brought their children to meet him. "This is the man who made a doctor," they'd say. He would laugh and say, "No, I just sold water. She did the rest." But deep down, he knew it was their bond that made it all possible. The unspoken language between a father and daughter who never gave up on each other. He told stories now, not of battles or fame, but of ordinary days that built extraordinary outcomes. He spoke of love's endurance, of sacrifice without complaint, of believing in someone even when the world doesn't. His story spread beyond the clinic. A journalist once came to write about him, but he refused any interviews. "Write about her," he said. "I was just the start." The daughter eventually received awards and recognition for her service. Newspapers wrote about her. Medical journals praised her, but she never let it change her. At the first award ceremony, she brought her father as her guest. When they called her name, she walked to the stage, holding his hand. She lifted the plaque and said, "This belongs to him." The crowd stood in silence, then erupted into applause. Cameras flashed, but all she saw was his face, smiling like the sun. Later that night, they returned to their small home. She placed the award on a shelf next to old photos and a cracked teacup. "I don't need a mansion or diamonds," she told him. "You already gave me everything." They sat together in the quiet, the world outside rushing forward, but in their home, time slowed down. Two hearts, still beating in rhythm, built not on riches, but on love that never failed. Sometimes the doctor visited schools to speak to children about dreams. She never arrived in a fancy car or with a team. She walked quietly in her white coat and told them a story, not about science, but about love. She showed them a photo of her father with his cart and said, "This was my first classroom." Children listened with wide eyes. They didn't just hear facts, they felt hope. One boy raised his hand and asked, "Did he ever give up?" She smiled and answered, "Not for 1 second." These talks weren't part of her job, but they were part of her purpose. She knew that seeds planted in young hearts grow into forests of courage. If even one child went home believing in their future, she considered the day a success. Afterward, she'd sit in an empty classroom, thinking about her childhood, how the world saw them as poor, but she always felt rich because of his love, his laughter, and his belief in her. That memory made her stronger than any degree ever could. Over time, her clinic expanded. More doctors joined her cause. Some were inspired by her story, others by her kindness. She trained them personally, not just in medicine, but in humanity. "Treat each patient like they're your family," she would say. "Look into their eyes. Listen with your heart." Her team respected her deeply. She wasn't just a leader, she was an example. Even when the clinic grew larger, she never stopped seeing patients herself. The waiting room remained full, the walls still plain, but the energy inside was sacred. One of her new doctors asked why she never moved the clinic to a richer area. She replied, "Because this is where I'm needed, and this is where he pushed his cart." The doctor nodded, understanding. It wasn't just about healing bodies. It was about honoring a journey that began with coins, sweat, and faith. Every room in the clinic whispered his name, even if no one spoke it aloud. Her father's health began to decline slowly. His steps grew unsteady, and his voice became faint. She adjusted her schedule to be with him more. They sat for hours, holding hands in silence, sometimes talking about the past, sometimes saying nothing at all. One evening, he told her, "You've given me a second life." She shook her head and whispered, "You gave me my first one." They often looked through old photos together. He'd point to the cart and say, "That was my treasure chest." She'd laugh, brushing away tears, and say, "And I was the treasure." As his world grew smaller, her care grew deeper. She became his nurse, his cook, his company. The doctor who healed others now dedicated her hands to the one who raised her. She never saw it as a burden. It was a sacred honor. And when he slept, she'd sit beside him, watching over him like he once watched over her. The city around them continued to change. New roads, taller buildings, faster lives. But inside their home, time was still. Love had created a sanctuary that no storm could shake. The neighbors helped, too, bringing meals or running errands. They remembered his kindness from years before. "He once gave me water for free," an old woman recalled. "He helped carry my groceries," said another. His small acts had planted kindness in the hearts of many. Now, that kindness returned like a gentle echo. In his final weeks, the doctor read to him each night. She chose stories about hope, faith, and resilience. Sometimes he'd drift off to sleep mid-sentence, his breath soft and peaceful. She'd pause, kiss his forehead, and whisper, Thank you, Papa. One night, as rain fell softly outside, he held her hand, looked into her eyes, and said, "Promise me you'll keep going." She nodded through tears and whispered, "With every step, I'll carry you." The day he passed away, the city seemed quieter. The sun rose slowly and the air was still. The doctor didn't cry in front of others. She stayed strong, welcoming mourners with grace. But in her heart, a part of her had gone with him. The funeral was small but filled with love. People from all walks of life came: doctors, patients, children, elderly neighbors. Each brought a memory, a flower, a tear. Some brought coins, placing them gently beside his photo. "For the waterman," they said. She spoke briefly, standing beside his cart, now polished and surrounded by flowers. "He never wore a tie or sat behind a desk," she said, voice trembling. "But he taught me the greatest lesson: how to live for others." After the ceremony, she brought the cart home. It stayed by the window, filled not with water, but with flowers and photos. A reminder that greatness is not always loud. Sometimes it sells water in the sun. After her father's passing, the doctor returned to the clinic the very next day. Some told her to take time off, to rest, to grieve, but she said gently, "He wouldn't want me to stop." And so she walked into the waiting room, white coat pressed, eyes red but focused. The patients rose in silence as she entered. Many had heard the news. One old man stood and placed a single coin in her hand. "For him," he whispered. She nodded, holding the coin like a jewel. That day she worked with a quiet intensity. Every heartbeat she heard, every wound she touched, every child she smiled at was part of her mourning, part of her tribute. In the break room, she took a sip of water and whispered, "Still serving." Her team gave her space when needed, but also rallied around her with deep respect. They knew she wasn't just a doctor, she was the keeper of a legacy. She started a new program in her father's name, the Water Sellers Fund. It offered scholarships for young people from poor families who wanted to study medicine. "No dream should be priced out of reach," she said during the launch. The fund was modest at first, built from donations and small grants. But soon, stories of her father's sacrifice moved people. Donations came from around the world. Former patients, fellow doctors, even strangers sent what they could. One letter arrived from a little girl who sent her tooth fairy money. "To help another, girl become a doctor," it read. The daughter placed the note on the clinic wall. Soon the wall filled with thank you letters, drawings, coins, and photos. It became a shrine of gratitude, not just to medicine, but to love. And every time she passed it, she touched one of the coins, remembering the sound they used to make. When he returned home, tired but smiling, one evening she visited the old street where her father used to sell water. The city had changed. The buildings were taller, the sidewalks wider, the people faster, but the corner was still there. She stood for a long time, imagining him there in the heat, offering water with a soft smile. she placed a small plaque on the wall. Here stood a man who gave everything so others could rise. A few people stopped to read it. One young boy asked, "Who was he?" She answered softly, "My father, a hero in simple clothes." The boy's mother smiled and said, "Heroes like that never fade." As she walked away, she felt peace. She wasn't chasing awards nor praise, just continuing a story that began with thirst, with struggle, with faith. And though the world may never fully know his name, every person she healed was a living tribute to his love. Years passed. A Biao clinic grew into a small hospital. It still carried the same name, still welcomed the poor, and still held the warmth of its earliest days. The doctor's hair began to gray, but her spirit never faded. New generations of doctors worked beside her now, many who were once children she had treated. They called her teacher, mother, angel, but she always corrected them gently. Just a daughter of a water seller. Every week she held a small class for young interns. She spoke not of textbooks, but of empathy. Learn their names, learn their stories. It matters. Some took notes, others just listened. But all were changed. And after each session, she'd walk past her father's cart, still standing by the window, still holding the silence of sacrifice. She'd place a fresh flower in it every Monday, a ritual of remembrance, a symbol that love never retires. One winter, a boy came in with frostbitten hands. He had no gloves, no coat, and barely any words. The doctor wrapped his hands gently, her touch warmer than the blankets. He looked up and asked, "Why are you helping me?" She smiled and replied, "Because someone once helped me." The boy stayed a few nights, recovering. Before he left, he drew a picture, her standing beside a man with a water cart, both smiling. She framed it and hung it near the entrance. Patients pointed at it, asking, "Is that your father?" She'd nod. "Yes, the reason this place exists." The drawing became a symbol of healing, not just for bodies, but for broken stories. And every winter afterward, the clinic collected coats and blankets, distributing them in his name. No, one left cold again. The water cellar, though gone, continued to warm the world. One day the doctor was invited to speak at an international medical conference. She hesitated. Public stages weren't her comfort zone, but someone reminded her, "Your story belongs to the world." So she agreed, flying for the first time, to another country. In the grand hall, filled with experts, she stood humbly. She didn't speak of complex procedures or rare conditions. Instead, she shared a photo of her father and said, "This is the foundation of my medical training." The room fell silent. Some had tears in their eyes. She told them how love, sacrifice, and faith can build clinics, how coins can pay for dreams. She didn't need applause, though it came, thunderous and long. Afterward, several young doctors came to her and said, "You've changed the way we see medicine." She smiled quietly. Her mission wasn't to impress minds, but to move hearts. And once again, the spirit of the water cellar had reached a new place. Back home, life continued, simply. She still woke up early, still walked to the clinic, still drank tea from the same old cup. Her home was filled with memories, but it never felt heavy, just full. On weekends, she hosted small gatherings with neighborhood children. She read stories, served simple snacks, and reminded them they were important. One child once asked, "Why do you help so many people?" She thought for a moment, then answered, "Because someone helped me when I had nothing." They didn't always understand fully, but they felt it. That feeling was the beginning of understanding. Some brought her drawings. Some brought flowers. One girl brought her a bottle of water with a note, "For the daughter of the waterman." She kept it on her nightstand. Every night before sleeping, she looked at it and whispered, "Thank you, Papa." Even in quiet moments, his presence surrounded her. She often visited her father's grave, which sat beneath a quiet tree at the edge of the city. She didn't bring large bouquets, just a single white flower. She'd sit for hours, telling him about the clinic, the patients, the letters, the laughter. "You're still changing lives," she'd say softly. Nearby, other graves had faded, forgotten, but his was always clean, always cared for. Sometimes people would pass by and pause at his stone. They'd read his name and whisper, "The man with the cart." And if she heard them, she'd smile, knowing that even without ever meeting him, they felt him. His story had outlived his body. His kindness had taken root in the city's soil, and with every passing year, more flowers appeared beside the stone, not planted by her, but by those he'd once helped. No monument was needed. The city itself had become his memorial. As she grew older, she began writing. Not a memoir, but letters. Letters to her future students, to the children of the clinic, to the world. She wrote by hand, slowly and thoughtfully. Each letter ended with the same words: "Serve with love, live with courage. Never forget where you came from." Some letters she mailed. Others she left in hidden places, between books, inside drawers, beneath pillows at the clinic. It was her quiet way of planting more seeds. And one day, when she was gone, people would find them and feel her presence. The daughter of the water seller had become a storyteller, a healer, a bridge between what was and what could be. Her hands had delivered babies, bandaged wounds, comforted the dying, and held the hands of the forgotten. And through all of it, she never stopped being his daughter. That title was her proudest. On her final day, the sun rose gently. She sat by the window with a cup of warm tea, the water cart still visible beside her. She smiled at it, remembering every creak of its wheels, every coin it carried. She wore her white coat one last time and looked in the mirror. "He'd be proud," she whispered. Then peacefully she closed her eyes. When the news spread, the city wept. Not just for a doctor, but for a story that had changed thousands. At her funeral, children and elders alike placed coins and water bottles beside her photo. For her and for him, they said. A statue was never built, but in every free consultation, in every act of kindness, in every classroom where she once spoke, Her legacy lived on. And somewhere in the wind, if you listened closely, you could hear the soft roll of cartwheels echoing through time, still delivering hope.